Hey, what's going on out there, everybody? My name is Haydn Adams with A Designer That Codes. In this tutorial, I want to show you how you can use the Gatsby Background Image Plugin on your website using Gatsby JS. As you can see, I have a finished version right here. The text sits above the picture, and it also scales in a responsive fashion. We're going to write some Gatsby JS. We're going to write some JSX along with some HTML and some CSS. As you can see, it's responsive back and forth. And the great part about this is you can easily change your background color as well. We're going to create a black overlay. Literally, I have a CSS file called a black overlay. And what that can do is you can change the opacity of the picture depending upon how you want it to look in your design. So with that, let's get started. Alrighty, so for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to use the Gatsby Starter default starter library. The reason why I like this is for two reasons. If we go into the Gatsby, let's go up here, the Gatsby Background Image Plugin, if you scroll down a little bit, I'm going to go back and forth this a couple times, it asks you to install the Gatsby Transformer Sharp and the Gatsby Plugin Sharp. The great part about this starter default is it already comes with the Gatsby Plugin Sharp and the Gatsby Transformer Sharp right here already with the dependencies. So when I did this with this demo, these two already came with it. If you're using a different starter package, double check that you do have both the Gatsby Transformer Sharp and the Gatsby Plugin Sharp. So the first thing we have to do is I want to show you what I'm working with right here. I have the layout, I have my header file, and I'm using my terminal, CD, I'm using a Dropbox, and I have it in Gatsby Demo Projects. And this one is going to be the Gatsby Background Image Demo. Gatsby, if I can spell, Gatsby Develop. Let's run this and see how it looks right now. Come on, you can do it. Gatsby Develop. I just did some minor modifications within the starter library. I took out all the existing code on the index page and just reduced the layout to really something really simple, as in just, there it is, div main children. So if we run this on the Gatsby Develop platform, waiting for building development bundle, there we go. If we take a look at this, here's where we are starting at the Gatsby Background Image header. Let's start here. So what I did was I took out all the default code. I kept home for the time being, but I wanted a really clean palette in which to work with. So if you're starting from scratch from the very beginning on the background image, what you have to do following this area is I'm going to say Control C. Is in the background image, it asks you to install the actual plugin. So if we scroll down, I'm going to copy and paste this yarn. I use yarn over NPM for a couple reasons, which I won't get into here. But for me, it really helps load in other dependencies really easily with the yarn install. So I'm going to copy this. And inside my terminal, I'm using also, if you are new to this, I'm using the Visual Studio Code, and it gives me both the terminal and my code all on the same screen. And just for reference, I can close these other windows to make it really easy. So we're just focused, there we go, on the terminal. So I'm inside my folder, Gatsby Background Image Demo. I'm going to paste yarn add Gatsby Background Image. And it's going to add version 1.2220 into my file. It's giving me a couple warnings. That's okay. We're totally fine. And that's the first step of loading up or installing this dependency into your project. Again, if you do not have the Gatsby Transformer Sharp or the Gatsby Plugin Sharp, you will need to add these, as we're going to use GraphQL in which to load our images up. This is the really powerful part about the Gatsby background image. We get to use the GraphQL, and essentially a lazy load and a fade in, which is really, really, really powerful. Cool. I have it installed. Gatsby Background Image Demo is ready to go. And if I run Gatsby Develop again, wait for it. It always takes a few seconds longer than I expect sometimes. I love watching the success and fails because every so often I might miss a semicolon, miss a bracket, and it tells me right away if the code is written properly or improperly. So I'm all set to go. Do note that you do have to put, if I go one more time back, if you have not loaded those other pieces into your project, you will have to go and add them into your Gatsby config, into your plugins with the Gatsby Transformer Sharp and the Gatsby plugin Sharp in there. So if you are not aware of this and you don't have it in yours, double check and make sure that you have set up your Gatsby source file system with the images, the directory, the source, the images, and the Gatsby plugin Sharp as well. For our demonstration, let me go find my folder just so we're looking at everything in the same way here. And let me double check. There we go. So note that my Gatsby source file system has the name images for the source of images. So I have an images folder right here, and I'm going to use this picture of Rarotonga on the South Pacific in my path right here to use my GraphQL. So let's actually go into my pages file and my index, and let's start writing some code. So in my project, if you're using the Gatsby Starter, you're probably going to see layout, SEO, and probably the spaceman, a couple other things. For me, I just took it all out. I said, let's start here in this design. And once again, let's start here. Along the way, you'll probably see the success showing up because it's going to tell me yay or nay if I'm doing something correct. How you start the process is inside of my index file or anywhere else you're going to use your Gatsby background image files. I'm going to say, where's my code? Import, and I'm going to say background image from, this is important, Gatsby background image. There we go. And it closed the semicolon, and I'm all set to go right here. The one thing I will also do as well is I don't have it yet, but we have to say import curly brackets. I put spaces just because, well, I put spaces around my curly brackets just for more readability pieces. I have to say GraphQL because I have to import that as well from Gatsby. And Gatsby it is. Note that it does turn these pieces dark because I haven't used them yet in my design. If I save it, success will tell me it's all working. Of course, it gives me warning messages saying the background image is defined but never used, and so is the GraphQL has been defined but never used. Let's go down the page a little bit lower and let's add a background image. So what I'm going to do is, because we wrote background image right here, we can use that as a tag inside of our JSX. I'm going to say background image, open and close. Now note that this does have an opening and a closing. If you're familiar with the image tag or the Gatsby image, you'll notice it does not have it open and close, but we're going to put content inside the background image. For right now, I'm going to write the word test because that tells me what test or text will be inside of the background image. If I save, once again, now we're down to 1. Warning, GraphQL is defined but never used. And there is not much going on here because I haven't changed anything. And the word test doesn't really show up because there's nothing to explain what this does here. Let's also get rid of let's start here. So for the background image, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to hit the return key. I'm going to move my cursor up where I can type other information in here. I'm going to keep that open for right now. In order to bring in a background image, we have to use the GraphQL. That's the next important piece of our design elements. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page below line 22 for export default index page. And down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a GraphQL function. I'm going to say export construct, or CONST, page query. Now don't forget we are writing JavaScript, so it's what's called camel case, lowercase first letter, capitalized second word or second letter of the first, or the capitalize the second word's first letter. There we go. Got it right. I'm going to say export construct page query equals GraphQL. And I'm also going to put the inverse marks and hit semicolon. I'm going to hit return key between the two slashes and hit tab in here. What do I want to query? Well, that's a good question. I'm going to query a new name. I'm going to give this name index image. Now here is where this lines up to the Gatsby image section. So if we go over and we do Gatsby JS image, let's go right here. I thought I had it pulled up, but I don't. The background image works a lot like the Gatsby image. So what it does is it pulls, if I can scroll down, I thought I had this open, but I guess I didn't. So what this looks like is I'm going to export construct query equals GraphQL, and I'm going to query a file, which the name is going to be relative path of the location of the picture. And I can choose, I just need to stop moving that. I can then choose how I want this picture to come in. It gives you so many options. You can say Gatsby image sharp fixed, 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 but I want to use the fluid methodology and the Gatsby image sharp, which is down here below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to say variable name index image colon file relative path. Now in here it's going to say where am I going? I'm going to say colon. I'm going to say curly brackets. I have to put the extra space inside of there. And the relative path is equal to the image, if I can type the quotes properly, rorotunga.jpg. Now in here, the file name, its relative path, is back in the actual config file. I'm going to say curly brackets, and now what I want it to do, I want to say child image sharp. I want this to be really, really crisp and clean. And I can set some parameters with the child image sharp. I can say fluid, because I want to make this go back and forth, and have a max width, if I can type width properly, of 1800 pixels. Now the picture I did create has a max width of 1800 pixels as well. And I'm going to say ... because if you go back to the Gatsby image, where are we here? All you have are ... to enable the different names. So I'm going to say is Gatsby image sharp fluid. And we can find it again over here. Whoa. There it is. With the Gatsby transformer sharp. I'm using the Gatsby image sharp fluid, so it'll actually load into the page. So if I save this, so far, yes, it works. And if we look at it, nothing happens. That's because we haven't gone back up to the top of the background image in order to load this picture in. So let's do just that. In background image, I thought I had a cursor in space there, but I guess I didn't. I'm going to say, is it fixed or fluid? In this case, I'm going to say fluid. I'm going to say equals, not those, but the curly brackets. I'm going to say props.data, and here's where our variable is going to come in, index image. So I'm going to say index image, and if you follow the path down, what you have to say is child image sharp in Fluid. So we have to follow this pathway down from this to this to this. So I'm going to say child image sharp dot fluid. So this takes the pathways. Notice I put a props in here as well. I have to put a props up top in order to bring it right back down where it was. So don't forget to put the props piece above and below. Let's also write some text to say text should go here. And if I save that, oh, check it out. We got a picture. And if we look at it really carefully, the text should go here and the picture is now behind it. So let's review. If we go back down here, I'm creating a page query using GraphQL, and I'm going to create an actual variable name called index image, and the file is the relative path is to Rarotonga. Now, because the starter already created that for me, I can just say Rarotonga. But if I have a submenu or a subfolder, I can create / extra images / Rarotonga. I don't have that, so I'm going to get rid of that. The child image sharp allows me to say basically how big I want this picture to be. So I want to say, okay, child image sharp, fluid, max width. I didn't choose a quality, but I can also set a quality to say 50 if I want to. And what I want it to do, I want it to use the Gatsby image sharp fluid right here. The reason why I use fluid is I can move my picture back and forth. Now, as you can see, the picture doesn't do much. It just sits there because it's a background image. And background images only conform to the area inside of it. So in this case, I have the text should go here. If I were to say something else like paragraph, another sentence, literally, and I save it, notice how the picture gets bigger or smaller. This is where we kind of go as far as we can in the HTML side of things, start bringing in some extra CSS to accommodate our background image. Let's work on the CSS next and come back to HTML. Now, because I'm using the Gatsby Starter image, there is actually a component called layout. You can write your CSS on whatever page you want. But my thing is, if I can make some kind of global file or a custom CSS that's specific to a certain design, I'm going to put it inside my layout when it comes to the Gatsby Starter file. So just so we look at this again, this is my layout. I've done a little bit of changes here and there. I've taken out the footer. I changed a couple pieces down below, but nothing really has changed for the most part. It's kind of stayed the way it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a new import. I'm going to say import, and what I did was in this design, if I go back into my components, I created a file called background image CSS in a CSS folder. This is just how I have to keep things clean. I have to keep all my JS files in my components and my CSS in my CSS and my pages in my pages. I'm not a big fan of mixing my CSS up in my components. That's how it came with the Gatsby Starter. I'm going to keep it the way it is for right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say import and say ... to go out of the folder and into CSS, and the file name is backgroundimage.css. Backgroundimage.css. Always going to have it as saving your files, because what's going to do is it's going to rebuild this and say, hey, is something wrong? So if I miss an S, it's going to go, there it goes. It told me it failed because it can't find the file backgroundimage.cs. If I replace it and I save it again, all is well, and it comes back in. This is why I love the terminal, because if any point in time I make a mistake, I can go back in and fix that. So I'm going to create a CSS file that's just specific to this design element. And in that file, if I go back to my example, I have nothing there, but I want to stylize this design a little bit more. And whenever I think of styling pieces, I think about biggest to smallest. And of course, the biggest box is the background image. And we can write classes in there as well. So let's do something to move our CSS forward. I'm going to write a class inside a background image. The reason why I'm just hitting the return key is so I can just see things in a vertical fashion. This is just a visual readability as best as possible. Because we are writing in JSX, we have to use camel case. We can't just say class, we have to say class name. I'm going to say class name equals, quote, masthead. That's the name I'm going to give this visual area inside my picture. I'm going to say class name masthead. And if we save, nothing's going to change because I haven't changed my CSS yet. It's still just sitting there, just really waiting to be stylized. But at least have a class name masthead. So let's go into background image and let's write class name masthead. Masthead used to be referred to the top part of a newspaper or a magazine. That was the masthead, the very top part of things. I'm going to say masthead, and now we are in CSS land, so we're out of the JSX, JavaScript, HTML world, and now we're into CSS land. Curly brackets return. I'm going to say width 100%. This just holds the space open in case I had something that it was changing back and forth. It will by default, but it still keeps my design fluid and keeping 100%. What I want to do for the height is I don't want to say just 50 pixels because yes, if I say 500 pixels, it will change. Maybe. There it goes. And that size does work. But here's the thing. It will always stay at that 500 pixels. What I want to do is, instead of saying pixels, I'm all about fluid, because if you notice in the last bit of code, I've only written fluid, 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 and fluid. And a actual pixel height means it's locked in place. What I'd rather say is 60 VH, or vertical height. This allows me to maintain the design based upon how it fits as it goes up and down. See, now this is actually flowing around my design. It's fluid. The picture does go up and down, but the great part about it is if someone has it closed, it doesn't take up the entire screen. Notice how it's 60. If I were to say 500 pixels, that picture doesn't move. Notice now it doesn't move back and forth. The picture does go side to side, but I want to make it as fluid as possible. So I like the vertical height, or VH. I'm going to give mine 60 VH in this design. What I also have to say to keep this thing in the right position is I want to say background size cover. This will inherently hold it in the right spot so it fits perfectly no matter how I size it up or down. That's the cover comes into play. I'm going to say background position, and in this case I'm going to say center just so it holds the center in position. Background repeat. I don't necessarily need to have this one, but I just like to put it in just in case I change something around. And for me, in my design, I usually put a margin bottom in this case. Because I'm not going to have, I'll say 10px right now. This is just because in most designs I use margin bottom to push things down, and if not, my text would bump right against this picture. You won't see it much in this design, so in theory we could take it out. And commenting, command / would be the comment. But now it holds everything pretty good. Text should go here, another sentence. But if you notice it, it's not turning black, or it doesn't have any kind of color gradation in here at all. It's just pure, beautiful beach. But if I want to add a text or a black overlay to this design, I'm going to write something brand new. Back in my index.js, I'm going to take this out for just a second. I'm going to say div class name, and in here I'm going to say black overlay. Text goes here. What I want to do is I want to create a box that fills the 100% of the space in here. And so what it does is it creates the black area to have more of an overlay. So I use black-overlay for my class name. And back in my background image, I'm going to say black overlay. I'm going to write this twice, one for WebKit, Safari / Chrome. I'm going to say display -WebKit -flex. And I always make a note to say Safari on this one. It prefers, whoa there, let's put it / and there we go. This just is a little extra thing that kicks in the WebKit, but overall display should be flex. And with that, I'm going to go down and say, okay, background color. Now here's when the magic happens. RGBA is red, green, blue, and alpha. If I say 0, 0, 0.5, we'll use this example for right now. I'm also going to say height equals 100%, semicolon. And for this demonstration purposes, I am going to align my text to the center because I want every single page to have that. So I'm going to say align items to the center and text align center. Now, if you don't want things right in the middle of your design, you can take these pieces out. But now what it does is it puts the text in the center of the box. Now we have to actually create a paragraph because I didn't actually create a p tag for this yet. So I have to do a little more work to this design. Actually, we'll take this out since I'm not using that as point in time. But align item center means this text will be in the middle of the page. And just for demonstration purposes, we'll say color equals white. And now we can see the text be a little brighter in that design. Notice now how the text sits in the middle of the box regardless of how it flows. So in this area right here, what I can also do is if that 0.5 is way too dark, I can say 0.2. And now it gets lighter. Or if I want something darker, I can say 0.9. And well, that's, well, pretty much too dark. Why don't we go and say 0.7 or 0.75? There we go. The reason why this is great is let's say you design all your pictures on all your pages and then you're like, you know what, that's way too dark. I want to lighten up. So yes, I could go to Photoshop and I could do this, but this gives me able to have the ability to change the number. We'll go 0.3 for right now in this design. Text goes here and we're all good to go. Now what I want to do is I want to create a content box in which to design for, because here's the thing. Readability dictates I can't read past about 750 pixels across the screen. So what I want to do is I want to create an inherent invisible box that sits in the middle of this background image and allows me to scale up and down as much as possible. Since I'm in the CSS land, I'm going to call this one content box. And in here, I'm going to do is I'm going to say max width 700 pixels, and I'll say text align center. And that allows my text to be centered in the box in here. If I go in here, I say text goes here. I'm going to say div class name, come on, equals text, or excuse me, content box. And I will say just p tag for right now. This is only a test. And I must have did something wrong because it's not aligning it. But what I can always do is I can say an h1 or a p tag. I can say content box. Oh, it is aligning it. I actually didn't align the tag properly. So it is content box p text align center, because now what it does is not want to move. And while I took a short pause for figuring out why it's not moving, I forgot something pretty obvious. In the content box, I did do a quick little scan of the content box. I realized I didn't set my margins to 0 auto. So what happens is in the max width, I'm going to say margin, if I can type margin properly. 0 auto essentially says move it to the middle of the screen. So what happens is, if we look at it again, notice how my box sits in the middle of the screen, and now that's how it's properly aligned. I can take out this content box. That was my mistake. And if I save it, it now sits in the middle, and the text align can also go away as well. And now it sits properly in the middle of the screen. I'm going to use text align center, but instead using margin 0 auto. This will go as far as the max width will allow it. So what I've done now is I've put all my designs in this piece. I've utilized the masthead, and now it's fluid in my design. So I can move it back and forth, and it's going to hold in that way. What I like about this way is that I can always take out the white if I don't want it either. But what I like to do is, in this design, is put my H1. This is where my H1 tag goes. And the great part about it is I can change whatever I want to put in here. I can put an H1. I can say this is my subhead. And notice how I didn't actually have to go back to text align. That's what I had to do. I was trying to do too many things at once. So notice how it does align to the left in the middle, but if I want to go even deeper, then I can always say, that's what I did before, text align center, and now it aligns to the center of the screen. I forgot one thing on top of that. Either text align in black overlay, or you can text align down here in the content box. Either way, it will align to the center if that's what you want to have, and you can put a button or something else below as well. But this is how you can use your Gatsby Background Image Plugin. And notice also if I hit Command R, for a split second, it's pretty hard to see on the screen, but it'll actually lazy load up to this picture and load instantaneously. So to review one more time, how I use the background image from Gatsby is I did an import, and I said import background image from Gatsby Background Image. The background image tag is right here, and I said class name, masthead, and if I also wanted, I can say fade in as well. That's the ability to also fade in my picture. So it actually will fade in the image. It's kind of hard to see because it loads so fast on this computer. But I said class name masthead, and I said I want this to be fluid, and I used a prop with data index image, which follows my code right here. I'm going to move this down just a little bit. Child image sharp, which is inside the curly brackets, and I said fluid, and I said max width 1800. Now do note if I change this to, let's say, 100, and I load it again, it will be really hard to see on the part of video, but this looks much more pixelated on the screen. So I'm going to go back to 1800 and Gatsby Image Sharp Fluid. If you want multiple pictures, all you have to do is duplicate this piece right here, because I'm going to query multiple images. And this is how you can use the Gatsby Background Image Plugin in your Gatsby JS projects. Thank you.